Look around you. The world is not waiting. It is not pausing. It is not sympathizing with your delay, your fear, or your excuses. Every second you spend explaining why you can't, someone else is out there proving that they can. And the truth is simple, uncomfortable, and necessary. Nobody is coming to save you, and nobody is obligated to understand your excuses. Excuses are one of the most comfortable habits a person can develop because they create the illusion of progress without requiring any real effort. They sound reasonable in the moment, even convincing. You tell yourself you are waiting for the right time, the right opportunity, the right energy, or the right conditions. But the truth is that excuses are simply delays dressed up as logic. They give you temporary peace of mind while quietly stealing your future. Every excuse you accept becomes a brick in the wall that separates you from the life you say you want. And the longer you rely on them, the more normal they start to feel until you no longer question them at all. At some point, you have to recognize that excuses are not external barriers. They are internal choices. Nobody forces you to delay your goals. Nobody prevents you from starting small. The resistance you feel is often not the world stopping you, but your own mind negotiating with discomfort. It tries to protect you from failure, embarrassment, or effort, but in doing so, it also protects you from growth. The mind is skilled at creating stories that sound justified. I'm too busy. I don't have enough resources. I'll start later. But every one of those statements is just a way of avoiding the responsibility of action. And avoidance always comes at a cost. Action, on the other hand, does not need perfect conditions. It does not wait for certainty or confidence. Action begins in imperfection, in doubt, and in resistance. It is not glamorous at the start, and it rarely feels comfortable. But action has one powerful quality that excuses will never have. It produces evidence. When you act, even in small ways, you begin to build something tangible. That something may be messy at first, but it is real. It exists outside of your thoughts. And once something exists, it can be improved, refined, and expanded. Excuses keep everything trapped in your mind, but action moves it into the real world. The difference between people who grow and people who remain stuck is not talent or intelligence. It is willingness to move before they feel ready. Those who rely on excuses are always waiting for confidence to appear first. But confidence is not a starting point. It is a result. It is built through repetition, failure, adjustment, and persistence. Every time you act without certainty, you weaken the power of excuses. Every small step forward sends a message to yourself that progress is possible even in discomfort. Over time, that message becomes stronger than fear, and discipline begins to replace hesitation. Excuses also create a false sense of control. They make you feel like you are choosing not to act because of external circumstances, when in reality, you are surrendering control over your life. The moment you say, I can't because, you hand power over to conditions that may never change. But action reverses that relationship. When you act, you stop waiting for life to adjust to you and instead begin adjusting yourself to life. That shift is subtle but powerful. It moves you from a passive observer of your circumstances to an active participant in shaping them. Eventually, you come to understand that excuses do not just delay progress, they replace it entirely. A person can spend years explaining why they haven't started, why they failed, or why they will try later, and still remain in the exact same position. Meanwhile, someone else with fewer advantages and more obstacles moves forward simply because they refuse to stop at explanation. Action creates momentum, and momentum creates change. Once movement begins, even slowly, it becomes easier to continue. But excuses always require stopping, pausing, and restarting a conversation that leads nowhere. Motivation is a feeling, and like all feelings, it is temporary. It arrives loudly, full of energy and intention, but it leaves just as quickly when reality becomes uncomfortable. Many people build their plans around motivation, waiting for the right mood to begin working on their goals. But this creates a dangerous dependency on emotion. The truth is that motivation cannot be trusted as a foundation for progress. It is unreliable, inconsistent, and easily disrupted by stress, fatigue, and distraction. If your success depends on motivation, then your success will always be unstable. Discipline, however, is not a feeling. It is a decision repeated over time. It does not care whether you are inspired or tired, confident or doubtful. Discipline is what remains when motivation disappears. It is the structure you build into your life that keeps you moving even when your emotions refuse to cooperate. Where motivation asks, "Do I feel like doing this today?" Discipline answers, "It must be done regardless." That shift in mindset is what separates short bursts of effort from long-term achievement. Without discipline, even the most talented individuals eventually fall behind those who simply refuse to stop showing up. One of the most misunderstood ideas is that disciplined people never struggle. In reality, they struggle constantly. The difference is that they do not negotiate with their struggle. They do not wait for perfect conditions or emotional readiness. They understand that discomfort is part of the process, not a signal to quit. Discipline means acting in alignment with your goals even when every part of you resists it. It is waking up early when you want to stay in bed. It is continuing when there is no immediate reward. It is showing up when no one is watching and no one is applauding. Over time, discipline builds identity. Every repeated action becomes a statement about who you are. When you consistently choose effort over ease, you begin to see yourself as someone who follows through. This identity is far more powerful than temporary motivation because it is self-reinforcing. The more disciplined actions you take, the stronger your belief becomes that you are capable of discipline. And once that belief is established, it no longer requires emotional support. You stop asking whether you feel like doing something because your identity already answers the question. Motivation also tends to be reactive. It depends on external stimulation. A video, a speech, a moment of inspiration can spark it, but once the stimulus fades, so does the energy. Discipline, on the other hand, is proactive. It creates structure before emotion is involved. It is built through routines, commitments, and systems that do not change based on mood. This is why disciplined people often appear calm in situations where others feel overwhelmed. They are not relying on emotional highs to carry them through difficulty. They are relying on habits they have already committed to. Ultimately, discipline is what turns intention into reality. Many people have intentions, dreams, and goals, but very few convert them into consistent action. The gap between intention and execution is where most people remain stuck. Discipline bridges that gap. It ensures that what you say you want and what you actually do begin to align. Without it, even the strongest motivation fades into regret. With it, even average effort compounds into extraordinary results over time. The world is not built to reward what you intend to do. It responds only to what you actually produce. You can have the most powerful vision in your mind, the most emotional story of struggle, and the most convincing explanation of why things are difficult. But none of that changes outcomes. Reality does not negotiate with intention, it only reacts to results. And results are measurable, visible, and undeniable. That is why two people can have equally compelling stories, yet only one moves forward in life. The difference is not in what they say, but in what they deliver. People often underestimate how quickly stories lose their value in the real world. At the beginning, your story might gain attention. It might even gain sympathy or encouragement. But sympathy does not build progress, and encouragement does not replace execution. Over time, people stop responding to explanations and start looking for evidence. They want to see what you have done, not hear what you plan to do. The world is constantly filtering out noise, and stories without outcomes eventually become noise. No matter how emotional or detailed your explanation is, it cannot compete with visible achievement. Results, on the other hand, do not need translation. They speak a universal language. Success is not about how well you can describe your effort. It is about what your effort produces. A result forces attention because it exists outside of opinion. It cannot be debated or reinterpreted the same way a story can. When someone achieves something, their history becomes less important than their outcome. The focus shifts from what they went through to what they accomplished. That is the harsh but fair structure of reality. It values evidence over narrative. Many people stay trapped in the cycle of storytelling because it feels productive. Talking about goals, sharing plans, and explaining obstacles can create the illusion of progress. It gives emotional release without requiring actual change. But over time, this becomes a substitute for action. The more you talk without producing, the more disconnected you become from real progress. Eventually, your words become heavier than your results, and that imbalance creates frustration. You begin to feel stuck, not because you lack ability, but because your energy is being spent on expression instead of execution. What separates those who move forward from those who remain stagnant is not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to stop hiding behind it. Everyone has a story of difficulty, limitation, or delay, but not everyone allows that story to define their output. At some point, you have to decide whether your story will be an excuse or a starting point. If it becomes an excuse, it traps you in repetition. If it becomes a starting point, it transforms into motivation for action. The difference lies in what you choose to do next, not what has already happened. Ultimately, the world does not remember explanations. It remembers outcomes. People may forget your words, your plans, and your promises, but they will not forget what you actually built, achieved, or changed. Results leave a trace that no story can replace. And in the end, it is not the most convincing voice that stands out. It is the one backed by undeniable proof. Comfort feels safe, but safety is not the same as progress. Comfort is designed to protect you from discomfort, not to push you toward improvement. It keeps you in familiar routines, familiar thoughts, and familiar limits. At first, this feels harmless, even desirable. Everyone prefers ease over struggle, but over time, comfort quietly becomes a cage. It reduces your willingness to take risks, weakens your tolerance for challenge, and slowly lowers your standards without you noticing. What once felt like rest eventually becomes stagnation. The problem with comfort is that it rarely announces its consequences. It does not feel dangerous in the moment. In fact, it often feels rewarding. Sleeping in instead of waking early feels good. Avoiding difficult tasks feels relieving. Choosing the easier path feels like self-care. But growth does not come from relief. It comes from resistance. Every time you choose comfort over challenge, you are not just avoiding discomfort, you are also avoiding the opportunity to expand your capacity. And what you avoid repeatedly becomes the boundary of your life. Growth always demands a form of discomfort because it requires you to operate beyond your current ability. That means facing uncertainty, making mistakes, and feeling unprepared. These experiences are not signs that something is wrong. They are signs that something is changing. But comfort resists that change. It tells you to stay where things are predictable, where outcomes are guaranteed, and where effort is minimal. The danger is that a life built entirely on predictability eventually becomes a life without progress. You remain stable but stagnant. There is a hidden trade-off that comes with comfort every time you choose it. You are also choosing a smaller version of yourself. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually. Your potential does not disappear. It simply goes unused. You become accustomed to avoiding difficulty, and over time, your tolerance for challenge decreases. What once felt manageable begins to feel overwhelming. Tasks that should feel normal start to feel heavy. And eventually, the very idea of effort begins to feel like something to avoid rather than embrace. The truth is that discomfort is not the enemy. It is the signal that you are stepping beyond your limits. Every meaningful improvement in life requires passing through a phase of resistance. Whether it is physical training, learning a skill, building a career, or changing a habit, discomfort is always present at the beginning. The difference between those who grow and those who remain stuck is not the absence of discomfort, but the willingness to stay in it long enough for adaptation to occur. Comfort interrupts that process before transformation can happen. In the end, comfort does not destroy you suddenly. It slowly convinces you that there is no need to change. It replaces ambition with routine and replaces effort with avoidance. And while it may feel peaceful, it comes at the cost of unrealized potential. Growth requires stepping into situations where comfort cannot follow, because only in those moments does real change begin to take shape. Responsibility is often misunderstood as a burden, something heavy that limits your freedom. But in reality, responsibility is the exact opposite. It is the point where your power begins. The moment you take full responsibility for your life, you stop being controlled by circumstances and start influencing them. As long as you blame external factors, people, timing, environment, or luck, you remain in a passive position. You are always reacting, never creating, but when you accept responsibility, even for things that feel unfair or outside your control, you reclaim authority over your next move. Blame feels easier because it protects the ego. It allows you to explain failure without confronting your own role in it. When something goes wrong, it is tempting to point outward. The system is unfair, the timing was bad, the support wasn't there, the conditions weren't right. These explanations may contain some truth, but they come at a cost. Each time you shift responsibility outward, you also shift power away from yourself. You reduce your ability to act because you convince yourself that change depends on something or someone else. And when control is always external, progress becomes dependent on luck rather than effort. Responsibility, on the other hand, removes that illusion. It forces you to ask a difficult but necessary question. What part of this is mine to change? That question is uncomfortable because it eliminates excuses. It redirects attention from what you cannot control to what you can. And in that shift, something powerful happens. You stop waiting for conditions to improve and start working with what is already available. Even if the situation is not ideal, responsibility turns it into something usable. It transforms limitation into direction. One of the strongest effects of taking responsibility is that it builds clarity. When you stop blaming, you stop scattering your attention across external causes. Instead, you begin to focus on your actions, your habits, and your decisions. This clarity is essential for growth because it simplifies the problem. Instead of trying to control everything around you, you focus on controlling yourself. And self-control is the only form of control that consistently produces long-term change. Everything else is uncertain, but your response is always within reach. Responsibility also strengthens resilience. When you believe that outcomes are entirely dependent on external forces, failure feels final and discouraging. But when you take responsibility, failure becomes feedback. It is no longer evidence that the world is against you. It becomes information about what needs to improve. This shift changes how you respond to setbacks. Instead of withdrawing or giving up, you adjust, learn, and try again. Responsibility turns setbacks into stepping stones rather than stopping points. Ultimately, responsibility is not about accepting blame for everything that happens to you. It is about recognizing your ability to respond to everything that happens. It is the understanding that while you may not control every situation, you always control your direction. And that realization is where real power begins. Time is the one force that treats every human being the same way, yet exposes them in completely different outcomes. It does not wait for preparation, it does not pause for hesitation, and it does not rewind for regret. Whether you are ready or not, whether you are confident or doubtful, time continues moving forward with absolute consistency. That is what makes it both neutral and unforgiving. It does not care about intentions, emotions, or explanations. It only records what you did with it while you had the chance. One of the most dangerous illusions people fall into is believing that there will always be later. Later to start, later to fix things, later to become serious, later to change direction. This illusion creates comfort in delay. It convinces you that time is flexible, that opportunities are permanent, and that life will remain open, ended until you are ready. But reality does not operate that way. Every delay quietly reduces the number of opportunities available to you. What feels like harmless postponement is actually time being spent irreversibly in the background. Time also has a compounding nature. Small actions done consistently today create outcomes that become visible months or years later. But the same is true for inaction. Every day you delay effort, you are not just staying in the same place, you are falling behind a moving standard. Others are progressing, building skills, gaining experience, and accumulating results. Meanwhile, delay creates distance that is not immediately obvious, but becomes undeniable over time. The gap does not appear suddenly. It grows silently until it becomes difficult to ignore. There is a particular point in life where people begin to realize that time is not just passing. It is pricing everything. Every decision has a cost measured in time, and every moment spent avoiding action is a moment lost permanently. Unlike money, time cannot be recovered, replaced, or negotiated. Once it is gone, it does not return in any form. This is what makes excuses so expensive. They do not just delay progress, they consume the one resource that determines whether progress is even possible. The harsh truth is that time does not respond to emotional readiness. You do not become more deserving of success simply because you feel prepared. Readiness is developed through engagement, not waiting. Many people assume that conditions will eventually align perfectly, but time does not arrange itself around comfort. It moves forward regardless of your internal state. The world continues evolving, opportunities continue shifting, and circumstances continue changing whether you participate or not. The only question is whether you are moving with it or watching it pass. Ultimately, time is not something you manage casually. It is something that defines the outcome of every choice you make. It does not negotiate, pause, or forgive delay. It simply moves forward, and in doing so, it separates those who act from those who wait. And so the final truth is simple, even if it is not always easy to accept. You do not need more time. You need to decide what time is for. You do not need perfect conditions. You need movement in imperfect ones. Because while excuses feel convincing in the moment, they never survive the weight of results. And while delay feels harmless today, it always becomes expensive tomorrow. At some point, every person reaches a quiet turning point where the conversation with themselves changes. It is no longer about what could have been done or what should have been done, but about what will be done from this moment forward. That is where everything shifts, not in theory, not in intention, but in execution. Because in the end, time will keep moving either way. The only difference is whether it moves you forward or leaves you behind.